We recently explored the rise of AI agents, autonomous entities capable of navigating the web and executing complex tasks with minimal human intervention. But while those discussions often felt like a glimpse into a distant horizon, the landscape shifted beneath our feet much faster than anyone anticipated. The era of theoretical potential has ended, and the era of industrial disruption has arrived. This shift was marked by a specific moment in time when the design war changed forever, moving from incremental updates to a full-scale institutional pivot. It was not just another software update, it was a demonstration of power that sent shockwaves through the boardrooms of Silicon Valley. On a Tuesday that began like any other, Anthropic, the research-driven giant known for its meticulous focus on AI safety and reasoning, stepped out of the shadows of text-based chat and entered the arena of visual construction. They released the Claude Design features, and the market's reaction was immediate and violent. Within hours, the digital design world witnessed a staggering shift in sentiment. For Figma, the undisputed king of collaborative design, the announcement was more than a competitive gesture. It was a financial earthquake. Market trackers and private valuation metrics recorded a sharp 28% drop in perceived enterprise value. That is a figure representing a staggering $1.4 billion wiped off the books in a single day. This was not a slow erosion or a gradual decline. It was a sudden, jagged cliff that signaled the end of an era. To understand why this happened, we must look closely at the combatants in this high-stakes arena. On one side, we have Figma, the incumbent hero that revolutionized the industry by bringing design to the browser and fostering a collaborative ecosystem that even the giant Adobe could not match. On the other, we have Anthropic, the challenger, armed not with better vector tools, but with a foundational intelligence model that understands the very logic of an interface. The announcement video for Claude Design did not just show a simple chatbot suggesting colors or icons. It showed a system that constructs, reasons, and builds. It did not offer a helping hand. It offered a replacement for the hand itself. In the industry, many are calling this the red wedding of UI and UX tools. For years, designers have relied on a specific labor-intensive workflow: wireframe, prototype, and handoff. Figma sat at the center of this workflow, protected by a massive moat of user data, proprietary formats, and a vast plugin ecosystem. But when Anthropic unveiled a system that could generate production-ready code, React components, and entire design systems from a single conversational prompt, that moat started to look like a shallow puddle. This launch felt different because it bypassed the traditional assistive nature of artificial intelligence. It was not just fixing a typo or cropping an image, it was fundamentally architectural in its approach. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. This transition from the speed of the market crash to a slow analytical breakdown requires us to look at the announcement video with a new lens. We have to ask a core question that now haunts every product manager and venture capitalist. Is Figma still a moat, or is the moat being drained by a model that sees design differently? We are witnessing a transition from manual interface labor to a deep structural shift in how humans interact with software. When an artificial intelligence can understand hierarchy, spacing, and brand identity without being manually guided by a human at every step, the traditional digital drawing board becomes a relic of the ancient past. Anthropic did not just build a better tool, they built a system that understands the why behind the what, rendering the manual pixel pushing of the last 2 decades obsolete. This was not an update, it was a demolition of the current design workflow. This is the beginning of a story about how intelligence is replacing labor, and $1.4 billion is just the full price of the first chapter. To understand how we arrived at this seismic shift, we must first look at the rise of Figma itself. For years, the creative industry was dominated by heavy, localized software that required significant computing power and localized file management. Adobe sat atop this mountain for decades, defining the tools of the trade with a suite of programs that were powerful but often isolated and cumbersome. Figma's genius was not necessarily in creating a superior drawing engine, but in recognizing that the future of design was collaborative and browser-based. By making the canvas accessible to anyone with a link, they essentially democratized the process of building digital interfaces and broke the long-standing Adobe monopoly. They built a formidable moat not just through proprietary technology, but through a shared, real-time workflow that became the gold standard for every major tech company in the world. However, That moat was constructed on a foundation that had remained largely unchanged for 20 years, vector-based design. For 2 decades, the standard for digital creation has been the manipulation of points, lines, and shapes. Even within Figma's innovative environment, the designer still acts as a digital draftsman, manually moving boxes and adjusting curves to represent a conceptual idea. This is the wall that has defined the industry for a generation. No matter how many collaboration features were added, the underlying work remained a labor-intensive process of manual drafting. Designers were required to translate human intent into a series of visual coordinates. This translation process is exactly where the disruption is now occurring. Large language models have moved beyond the boundaries of text-based chat and have entered the realm of vision and spatial reasoning. They are no longer just reading your prompts. They are seeing the canvas and understanding the underlying structural logic of an interface in ways that were previously impossible for a machine. Anthropic's strategy in targeting the design sector was a calculated strike at one of the most high-value bottlenecks in the software development lifecycle. While other AI companies were content building better chatbots or image generators for social media, Anthropic recognized that the real power lay in the bridge between idea and execution. By focusing Claude's reasoning capabilities on design, they chose to tackle the area where human cognitive labor and manual effort are most intertwined. This was not about making a prettier picture, it was about understanding the why behind a layout. Before this catalyst, professional designers were trapped in a state of constant pixel pushing. Industry data suggests that designers spend nearly 40% of their time on repetitive, low-level tasks such as aligning elements, managing spacers, updating component variants, and ensuring that a design system remains consistent across hundreds of separate screens. It was a world of high-skill professionals performing digital grunt work. The moment Claude Design entered the arena, it signaled the end of this repetitive cycle. The catalyst was not just the speed of generation, but the system's sudden understanding of hierarchy, spacing, and brand identity without constant human supervision. Claude does not just place a button on a screen because it was told to. It understands that a primary action requires more visual weight and a specific placement to be effective for a user. It understands the relationship between a header and its subtext and how those elements should respond to different screen sizes. This is reasoning-based design, a fundamental shift from the assistive AI tools of the past. It represents the transition from a passive tool to an active architect. To put this in perspective, imagine the difference between a traditional drawing board and an intelligent construction system. Traditional design tools, including Figma, are digital drawing boards. They wait for the human to draw every line and place every brick. In contrast, Claude Design acts like an architect who begins building the actual house, while the owner is still describing the general purpose of the rooms. It interprets the soul of the brand and translates it into a functional, structural reality instantly. This vision-centric approach allows the model to interpret a messy whiteboard sketch and turn it into a high-fidelity prototype that adheres to complex design systems. It is not just mimicking styles. It is applying logic to visual communication. For Figma and Adobe, the challenge is now structural. Their entire ecosystems were built to support the manual drafting era. Changing that DNA is not a simple software update. It is a fundamental re-engineering of how they perceive their own purpose in the market. As we move deeper into this shift, the gap between those who draw and those who reason will continue to widen, leaving the old giant scrambling to protect a moat that is rapidly being overtaken by a new kind of intelligence. This isn't just about pixels anymore, it is about the very nervous system of creation. The core of Claude Design's disruptive power lies in its fundamental shift from visual rendering to semantic reasoning. While traditional tools treat a user interface as a flat collection of vectors and layers, Anthropic's model perceives it as a living, logical structure. This is the difference between a painter who knows where to put the color and an engineer who knows why that placement matters. When a designer interacts with this new system, they are communicating with an intelligence that understands the underlying rules of a design system. A button is no longer just a rectangle with a specific hex code. It is a functional component with a defined state and a set of interactions that must remain consistent across an entire digital ecosystem. This deep interpretation allows Claude to maintain brand integrity with a level of precision that manual human oversight rarely achieves. Instead of generating a static image that a developer must then recreate, Claude Design interprets intent and translates it directly into production-ready code. Whether it is React, Tailwind, or Vue, the system bypasses the handoff friction that has haunted the software industry for decades. In the legacy model, a designer creates a visual asset, and a developer interprets it to write the logic. With Claude, the logic and the visual are born simultaneously. The AI understands that if a navigation bar is moved, the layout's responsive breakpoints must adjust automatically. It understands that a change in primary color must propagate through every instance of a component. This is reasoning-based design, prioritizing the why of the interface, ensuring the user journey is intuitive, rather than just the what of the appearance. This approach spells a potential end for the vast plugin ecosystems that companies like Figma have spent years cultivating. For a long time, plugins were the solution to the limitations of manual design tools. If you needed to generate dummy data or check color contrast for accessibility, you downloaded a third-party script. These were essentially band-aids applied to a tool that could not perform those tasks natively. Claude Design, however, functions as a centralized nervous system. It does not need a plugin to check for accessibility because accessibility logic is baked into its reasoning core. It does not need a plugin to generate documentation because it understands the structural intent of the layout well enough to write the technical specifications as it builds. The intelligence is inherent, not modular or added on. Compare this to Adobe Sensei, the legacy giant's earlier foray into AI. Sensei was designed as a series of assistive features like smart selection and content-aware fill. These were powerful, but they were still subservient to a manual workflow. They were tools meant to make the doing slightly faster. Claude represents a move into generative logic, where the system itself acts as the primary creative force. When faced with a complex constraint, such as fitting massive amounts of data into a mobile viewport while maintaining brand consistency, the system reasons through the hierarchy of information. It decides which elements are essential and which can be deferred, all while respecting the constraints of the existing design system. It is solving problems, not just drawing solutions. Imagine a design file that essentially manages itself. In this new paradigm, the file is not just a container for shapes. It is a repository of intelligence. It can test its own usability, flag friction points for the user, and ensure that every one of the 1,000 screens it generates is perfectly aligned with the core identity of the product. This scalability is where the incumbent giants lose their footing. A human team would take weeks to audit a library of that size. Claude does it in seconds, treating the entire product as a single cohesive entity. This is the technical engine that stripped over $1 billion from Figma's valuation. It is a system that doesn't just help you work, but understands the design itself, moving beyond the canvas into the very logic of creation. The technical chasm between a sophisticated editing tool and a reasoning engine is wider than a simple feature update can bridge. For Figma, the very architecture that allowed it to dethrone Adobe is now its primary anchor. Figma was built to be the ultimate digital drawing board, a space where multiple humans could manipulate vectors in real time within a browser. Its codebase is optimized for low latency manual interactions, calculating the exact position of a cursor, rendering layers, and maintaining a version history of human-made changes. This is not merely about adding a feature. It is about re-architecting the entire creative process. Claude Design, conversely, is built on a foundation of neural weights and transformer blocks. It does not think in terms of coordinates until the final stage of its process. Instead, it thinks in concepts. When the designer asks for a dashboard, Figma's existing AI attempts might try to search a library of pre-made components. Claude, however, generates the layout based on a deep understanding of information density and user hierarchy. This architectural disconnect leads directly into the classic innovator's dilemma. Figma's business model is predicated on the idea that design is a labor-intensive, professional craft that requires specialized seats and collaborative licenses. If they were to implement a system as powerful as Claude, one that effectively renders much of manual pixel pushing obsolete, they would be cannibalizing their own value proposition. If the designer can do the work of 5 using an automated engine, Figma risks losing 4 paid seats in that enterprise account. Their current pricing structures are tethered to the editor role. When the AI becomes the primary editor, the entire financial ecosystem of the SaaS design world begins to crumble. This is why the market responded with such volatility. Investors realize that Figma's growth engine is fueled by the very manual friction that Anthropic is now systematically removing. Beyond the business model, there is a profound technical gap. Building a foundational model like Claude 3 Hive requires billions of dollars in compute and specialized research talent that a design tool company does not possess. Figma and even Canva are essentially tenants in the AI era, renting intelligence from the landlords of the large language model world. They might integrate GPT-4 or Gemini via an API, but those integrations are often superficial wrappers. They are trying to bolt a jet engine onto a bicycle. The engine might make the bicycle go faster, but the frame was never designed for those speeds. Anthropic, as the creator of the engine, can integrate design logic directly into the nervous system of the model. They can train the model to understand the relationship between a CSS property and a visual design principle in a way that an external API call never could. They are not just interpreting the design, they are defining the logic that governs it. Canva faces an even more existential threat. For years, Canva's dominance was built on the template model, providing non-designers with predefined layouts. But templates are, by definition, rigid. Claude Design offers a personal chef experience. Instead of forcing the designer to scroll through a library of templates to find something that almost fits, the AI creates a bespoke design from scratch that is perfectly aligned with the brand's specific identity. When the cost of a unique, high-fidelity design drops to near zero, the value of a template library evaporates. Why settle for a generic post when an AI can generate one that reflects your specific brand voice and metrics in a fraction of a second? The transition from a tool company to an intelligence company is a pivot that few legacy giants survive. Adobe, despite its massive resources, is still grappling with its identity. Is it a suite of professional tools, or is it an automated production house? Figma finds itself in a similar state of strategic stagnation. They are attempting to add AI features to a canvas that was never meant to be autonomous. They own the canvas, the place where work happens, but Anthropic owns the brain that decides what work needs to be done. The question is no longer whether AI can design, but whether manual tools can remain relevant in a world that demands instant, intelligent results. This shift represents a fundamental realignment of power. The $1 $4 billion wipeout was a realization that the moat Figma built is being drained by a new form of generative logic. The giants are now forced to play a game where they do not own the rules, as the tide of automated design fully overtakes their shores. As the corporate dust settles and the market valuations fluctuate, a deeper, more personal transformation begins to unfold within the design studios and global tech hubs. The designer is no longer just a manual laborer of the digital realm. The introduction of Claude Design has forced a radical reevaluation of what it means to be a professional in this space. For decades, the career path was clear. You started by mastering the tools, spending years learning the nuances of spacing, color theory, and the intricate keyboard shortcuts of the canvas. You were a pixel pusher, a craftsman who earned their stripes through the sheer volume of manual output. But that era is effectively over. The entry-level task, the very foundation of the design apprenticeship, is being absorbed by the machine. When Claude can generate a comprehensive, accessible, and brand-compliant design system in the time it takes to describe a concept, the traditional role of the junior designer evaporates. This creates a terrifying vacuum. If the AI does the grunt work perfectly, who will train the next generation of masters? However, this displacement is not merely a story of loss, it is a story of metamorphosis. The designer is being elevated from an artist to a creative director. The focus is shifting from how to build to what to build and why it matters. In this new paradigm, the value of a human professional is found in their ability to curate, to direct, and to apply a level of semantic judgment that the AI, for all its reasoning capabilities, cannot yet fully replicate. The augmentation reality is already here. We are entering a world where a single designer, empowered by Claude's nervous system, can match the output of a 5-person agency. This multiplier effect changes the economics of the industry. Small startups can now launch with the visual polish of a Fortune 500 company. Independent creators can prototype entire ecosystems before their morning coffee has cooled. The distance between thought and functional prototype has shrunk to nearly zero, but this speed brings a new set of risks. If everyone is using the same foundational models to generate their interfaces, do we risk a sea of sameness? Will the internet become a beige landscape of optimized AI-generated efficiency? The answer lies in how the designer chooses to leverage the tool. While the AI provides the floor, a high-quality, Functional baseline. The human provides the ceiling. The creative director doesn't just accept the first iteration. They push the model, challenging its constraints and injecting the kind of idiosyncratic human friction that defines true innovation. It is the difference between a calculated solution and an inspired one. The fear of job loss is real, but it is often misdiagnosed. The threat is not the AI itself. The threat is the designer who refuses to evolve. In this landscape, the competitive edge is no longer your ability to draw a perfect vector, but your ability to manage an intelligent system that does it for you. This shift represents the end of interface labor as a commodity. When execution is automated, strategy becomes the only true differentiator. The designer must now become a systems thinker, understanding how design intersects with business goals, user psychology, and technical feasibility at a level that was previously reserved for the most senior executives. The doing has been outsourced to the nervous system of the AI, leaving the thinking as the final human frontier. This is not just a change in workflow, it is a change in identity. We are witnessing the birth of a new type of professional, one who views the AI not as a competitor, but as an extension of their own creative intent. The moat around the individual designer's career is no longer built on technical skill, but on the depth of their vision and the precision of their curation. This transition is jarring, yet it offers a glimpse into a future where human creativity is finally unburdened by the repetitive mechanics of production, allowing the true essence of design to flourish in ways that redefine the very nature of digital innovation. As the role of the creator expands, the world prepares for the next phase of this evolution, where the boundaries between software and intelligence blur entirely. The transformation we are witnessing goes far beyond the edges of the canvas. We are standing on the precipice of a new horizon where the very concept of software is being redefined. This is the beginning of the era of software that builds software. If Claude Design can understand the fundamental intent behind a user interface, it is only a small leap before it begins to understand the underlying logic of the entire application. The ripple effects of this shift are already beginning to destabilize adjacent fields. Front-end engineering, once a bastion of complex coding and layout management, is facing its own existential crossroads. When a reasoning-based AI can output production-ready React, Vue, or Tailwind code directly from a high-level conceptual description, the traditional boundary between the designer and the developer begins to dissolve. The engineer is no longer primarily needed to translate a static image into functional code. The system does it instantly, perfectly, and with built-in accessibility and responsiveness. This disruption extends deep into the realm of product management. In the past, a product manager would spend weeks or even months mediating between the design and engineering teams, painstakingly translating user requirements into tickets. Now, the PM can communicate directly with the AI nervous system, prototyping full-scale features in real time and testing complex user flows before a single human developer ever touches the project file. The hierarchy of tech production is being flattened by the sheer speed of iteration. As these roles merge, the legacy giants are desperately scrambling to fortify their positions. Adobe, the veteran of the creative world, is preparing its ultimate counterattack. With Firefly and Sensei AI, Adobe is attempting to leverage its massive proprietary datasets, decades of professional-grade creative work, to build a model that understands the nuances of style, composition, and brand identity better than any general-purpose LLM. They are banking on the idea that their deep integration into corporate workflows will provide a shield against the disruptive force of Anthropic. Whether they can pivot fast enough to compete with a company that was born in the AI-first era remains the billion-dollar question for the coming years. However, this rapid advancement brings us to a significant and currently unanswered question. Who owns the intellectual property of a design generated entirely by Claude? If the AI draws from a vast sea of training data to construct a bespoke design system, does the company that prompted it truly own the final result? The legal frameworks of our current world are woefully ill-equipped for a reality where the primary creator is a machine, and the human professional is merely a director of intent. This ambiguity creates a tension that will likely define the next decade of digital law and creative ethics. Yet, despite these legal and structural hurdles, the momentum of the industry is undeniable and accelerating. The $1.4 billion hit to Figma's sentiment was just a tremor before the earthquake. If a beta release of Claude Design features could cause such a massive reevaluation of the industry's leader in a single day, What happens when Anthropic releases the full, unbridled version of its design engine? We are moving toward a world where the difference between a tool that helps you work and an autonomous system that works for you becomes the ultimate competitive advantage. Figma and Canva are tools. They require a human hand to guide every stroke. Anthropic is building an intelligence that understands the final goal as well as the optimal path to reach it. This isn't just about a stock price or a temporary market valuation. It's about the end of interface labor as we have known it for the last 30 years. The era of pushing pixels for 8 hours a day is reaching its inevitable conclusion. We are entering a phase where the digital world is built with the speed of thought, where interfaces are fluid and responsive to intent rather than static and rigid. As the design war reaches its zenith, the industry must prepare for the next list of targets. If design is effectively solved, what is next? Architecture, legal drafting, the nervous system is expanding, and the old moats are being drained faster than the incumbents can build their walls. The revolution has moved from the research laboratory to the designer's canvas, and it is now rewriting the rules of the entire global tech economy. The question is no longer whether you will use AI, but whether you can survive in a world where the machine is the architect, the builder, and the critic all at once. This is the new paradigm, and the giants are running out of time.